Brainerd HRA Housing Choice Voucher HCV program, briefing and voucher issuance. The Housing Choice Voucher program team consists of Tanya, the Rental Assistance Manager, Ryan, the Rental Assistance Specialist, and Carrie, the Resident Program Coordinator. This is all of their contact information if you need to get a hold of them. Also, at any point in the future, if you need to get in touch with them, you can find their contact information on our website, or you can just call them in line and be transferred to one of them. So your HCV briefing packet, that, if you haven't already downloaded it, you will want to, because we're going to go over each document included in the packet. And this presentation goes over all of those documents. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, just make sure you write them down. Our staff will answer your questions you may have when you contact them to schedule your voucher issuance. So the first document in your packet is the Statement of Responsibilities. This is basically a mini version of the program rules, and so it's important that you read and understand these responsibilities, because failure to do so may result in the loss of your voucher. Because this Statement of Responsibilities is so important, I'm going to go through every single line item with you just to make sure it is understood. And then following that, we will continue on with the other documents in the packet, and we'll just briefly go over those. Okay. Continued participation in the Section 8 and other rent issuance programs is dependent on following the Statement of Responsibilities. Again, violation of the responsibilities may result in the denial or termination of assistance from the program. Cooperation. I understand I'm required to cooperate in supplying all requested information in the time frame required by the HRA to determine my eligibility and amount of rent assistance. Cooperation includes attending pre-scheduled appointments, completing, signing, and returning necessary forms, disclosing and verifying the Social Security numbers for all family members, cooperating with the inspection process, and providing evidence of citizenship or eligible immigration status for all family members. I understand that my assistance will be denied or terminated if I have missed 2 scheduled appointments, including, but not limited to, briefings, home or office visits, and inspections. Engaging in or threatening abusive or violent behavior toward Brainerd HRA personnel. Abusive or violent behavior includes verbal as well as physical abuse or violence. Threatened refers to oral or written threats or physical gestures that communicate intent to abuse or commit violence. Giving true and complete information. I certify that the information given to the Brainerd HRA on my household members, income, assets, deductions, and allowances is true, accurate, and complete to the best of my knowledge and belief. Reporting household members. A household member is defined as a person who cannot verify a permanent address elsewhere and lives or stays in my home more than 30 days. And a visitor is defined as a person who can verify a permanent address elsewhere and lives or stays in my home less than 30 days. Reporting household members. I understand and certify that the people I have listed on my most recent recertification application, lease, and voucher are the only people that live or stay in my home. I must notify the HRA in writing if anyone moves in or out of my home, including any birth, adoption, court-awarded custody, or marriage, within 30 days. I must provide the HRA a copy of written approval from my landlord for all household members I am requesting to be added to my lease. All household members must be approved prior to them moving into my home, including foster children and live-in aides. Brainerd HRA will increase my voucher size if members are added to my household by birth, adoption, or court-awarded custody of a child. My voucher will not increase for all other household members added until they have lived in my home for at least 12 months. The increase will take place at the next annual recertification following the 12-month requirement. I will be required to pay back money overpaid on my behalf due to untimely reporting or non-cooperation. If anyone receives mail at your address and they're not listed on your voucher, the HRA will consider them an unauthorized resident and your voucher will be terminated. So reporting household income. The HRA is required to review my household income when I start the program and every year thereafter. I understand and certify that I must provide true and complete information regarding my entire household's income. If I have changes in my household income prior to my next scheduled recertification, I must contact the HRA within 10 days of the change and complete an interim request form. Moving. I understand and certify that my household can only receive assistance in one unit in any 12-month period. I must give the HRA written notice at least 30 days before moving out of my rental unit. This applies even if I'm moving to another unit in the same building. I must give my landlord proper notice according to my lease prior to the move-out date. I must provide the HRA with a copy of that notice. If I move prior to the end of my lease, I must submit an agreement signed by my landlord. I understand that I must be in good standing with my landlord at the time I move out. I understand that an exception may be considered in accordance with the Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA, or as a reasonable accommodation request. The HRA may deny permission to move or terminate my assistance if I move prior to fulfilling the 12-month minimum requirement, my household has violated the statement of responsibilities, I owe money to any HRA, I owe money to my landlord while on the program, or I have not given proper notice to the HRA and my landlord. Lease violations, evictions, and moving without notifying landlord. I understand and certify that I must not commit any serious or repeated lease violations. Serious and repeated lease violations will include, but aren't limited to, non-payment of rent, utilities, and other fees, moving without proper notice, disturbance to neighbors, unauthorized guests, destruction of property, or living or housekeeping habits that cause damage to the unit or premises, criminal activity. I must give the HRA a copy of the eviction notice I receive within 10 days of receipt. If I'm evicted by court order or I move out before the end of my lease without my landlord's permission, also considered skipping, the HRA will terminate my rent assistance. Inspections. The HRA is required to inspect my home prior to rental assistance beginning and every year thereafter to make sure it's decent, safe, and sanitary housing. I understand and certify that I must allow the HRA to inspect my unit at reasonable times and after reasonable notice. The the request for tenancy approval, which is the RTA form, must be turned into the Brainerd HRA by the 20th of the month prior to the move. If the 20th falls on a weekend or holiday, the RTA must be received by the next day, the next business day. Going on with inspections, full assistance will not be paid if my unit does not pass inspection prior to or on my move-in date or recertification date. If full assistance is not paid due to failed inspection, it's my responsibility to negotiate the rent difference with the owner. Inspection violations caused by my household members or guests are my responsibility to correct and must be corrected within the time set by the HRA. Continuing with inspections, I understand and certify that an adult 18 years or older must be present for the inspection. And if the inspection has not been able to, if the inspector has not been able to get into my unit to complete an inspection due to my lack of cooperation, my assistance will be terminated after 2 missed appointments. Units owned by relatives. I understand that I must not receive rent assistance while residing in a unit owned by a parent, child, grandchild, grandparent, sister, or brother of any member of my family. The HRA may approve renting from a relative as a reasonable accommodation for a family member who is a person with disabilities. It is your responsibility to request an accommodation for HRA consideration. Okay. So the Reasonable Accommodation or Violence Against Women Act, which is also known as VAWA. An exception to program rules may be considered in accordance with the VAWA or Reasonable Accommodation Request for Persons with Disabilities. It's your responsibility to contact us, the Brainerd HRA, and request an accommodation in writing if you're a victim of VAWA or are a person with disabilities. You must explain what accommodation or exception is being requested and how it will help you utilize the program. The request must be reasonable. Drug-related or violent criminal activity notice. I understand that my assistance will be denied or terminated if any member of my household has been convicted or adjudicated within the last 3 years for any of the following criminal activities: drug-related criminal activity, violent criminal activity, or other criminal activity that threatens the health, safety, or right to peaceful enjoyment of other residents and persons residing in the immediate vicinity of the premises, including alcohol abuse. Drug-related or violent criminal activity notice. Again, I understand that my assistance will be denied or terminated if I have been evicted within the last 5 years from federally assisted housing, including a termination from the HCV or Section 8 program for drug-related or violent criminal activity. Any household member has been convicted of manufacturing or producing methamphetamine, that's permanent denial. And any household member that is currently registered as a sex offender under a state registration requirement is also grounds for permanent denial. Duplicate assistance, own, or sublease. I understand and certify that I live in the unit the Brainerd HRA is helping pay rent on. The unit that the Brainerd HRA is helping pay rent on will be my only residence, and I will not receive rental assistance for any other unit for the same time period. Household members living in my home are not living in another rental unit or receiving another rent subsidy. I must not own or have any ownership interest in my rental unit unless I am on the home ownership program through the Brainerd HRA. And I must not sublease or rent any part of my unit to anyone else. Subleasing includes receiving payment to cover rent and utility costs by a person living in the unit who is not listed as a family member. Side payments. I understand and certify that all lease agreements with the landlord must be approved by the Brainerd HRA. I'm not allowed to pay my landlord any more than my rent portion as approved by the Brainerd HRA. And making a side payment or entering into a separate lease agreement is a violation of the HCV Section 8 program. Payments made to my landlord and approved by the Brainerd HRA for additional amenities such as garages, pet deposit, washer, and dryer are not considered side payments. Absence from unit. I understand and certify that I must notify the Brainerd HRA in writing prior to being absent from my unit if I will be gone more than 30 consecutive days. I may be required to provide appropriate documentation as to the likelihood and timing of my return to my unit. I must continue to pay my portion of the rent in my absence. If I cannot pay my rent, I should give proper notice to vacate my unit. If the family is absent from the unit for more than 180 consecutive calendar days or 6 months, the family's assistance will be terminated. That's owed to a housing authority. I understand my rental assistance may be denied or terminated if I owe rent or other amounts to the Brainerd HRA or to any other HRA in connection with the HCV Section 8 or public housing programs, or I am not current with any repayment agreements. If I owe money to an owner under a HAP contract for rent, damages, utilities, I am responsible for under the lease or other amounts owed by the family under the lease. I am not current with any repayment agreements. Landlord screening. Landlords are responsible for screening all prospective tenants for their ability to pay the rent, take care of the unit, and other lease responsibilities. I understand that the Brainerd HRA must give prospective owners my current address and name and address of current and previous landlords, if known to the Brainerd HRA. Security deposit. I understand that the owner or landlord may collect security deposit that is up to, but not greater than, the amount that they would collect from an unassisted tenant. The Brainerd HRA does not pay any portion of the security deposit. National portability. HCV or Section 8 rent assistance can be used anywhere in the U.S. where there is a housing authority operating the HCV or Section 8 program. You will, however, be required to live in the Brainerd HRA's service area for 1 year prior to moving to another housing authority's service area. Criminal and administrative action for false information. I understand that false statements or information are punishable under federal law. I understand that false statements or information are grounds which could result in theft and fraud charges under the state and federal law. Fraud, bribery, corrupt, or criminal acts. I understand that I must not commit fraud, bribery, or other corrupt or criminal act in connection with the program. Summary of reasons for denial or termination of rent assistance. Again, this is a summary. We've gone over this, but it's very important that you understand it. The Brainerd HRA will deny or terminate my rental assistance for violating any of the Statement of Responsibilities or program rules, including but not limited to missing 2 scheduled appointments, including but not limited to briefings, annual recertifications, home or office appointments, and inspections, failing to cooperate with the inspection, providing false information to the Brainerd HRA, committing fraud, bribery, or any other corrupt or criminal act in connection with the program, failing to provide information requested by the Brainerd HRA, failing to report household members, failing to report changes in income, assets, deductions, or allowances within 10 days, moving without giving proper notice to my landlord and the Brainerd HRA, failing to follow or fulfill the terms of my lease, committing serious or repeated lease violations, being evicted by a court order, renting from a relative, engaging in drug-related violent or other criminal activity, including alcohol abuse. Additional reasons include violating inspection standards caused by my household or guests, including failure to pay utilities and damage to home, making side payments to my landlord above my Brainerd HRA approved rent portion, being absent from my home for more than 30 days without notifying the Brainerd HRA, entire household absent from the unit for more than 180 days or 6 months. Owing money to any HRA or landlord in connection with the program, receiving rent assistance for more than one unit, or not living in the unit I receive assistance in, engaging in or threatening abusive and violent behavior toward Brainerd HRA personnel. Signature and date of all household adults. This is where the head and spouse and all household members 18 and over need to sign. I have read and understand the statement of responsibilities. I understand that violation of these rules may result in the denial or termination of assistance. All right, so that concludes the statement of responsibilities document. Moving on, your next document in your packet should be this one here. Is called Important Lead Hazards. Make sure you read through that. It has some great information from the EPA. The next one here is your Crow Wing County Hope Housing Guide. This resource guide has a list of some landlords. Just so you know, not all landlords in this booklet will take vouchers, and then there are also many more that aren't listed in this booklet that do. So when you're looking for a unit or an apartment or wherever it is, your first question should be, do you accept vouchers? So moving on, this next one, not a fun topic, but needs to be addressed, bed bugs. Take a look at that, read through that, become familiar with them. It's one of those, nobody wants to talk about it, but we really should, so make sure you read through that fact sheet. This next one is a map of Crow Wing County and a listing of the cities that are included. So your voucher is good for anything inside the outline in Crow Wing County. And so anything outside the county would be with a different housing authority. Next document is the Housing Quality Standards, or what we call HQS, inspection requirements. This just goes through all of the requirements of the inspection. The next one is a list of the most common fail conditions found in HQS inspections. So this will just kind of give you an overview of that. The notice of portability is the next document. So once you've lived in Crow Wing County for 1 year, you'd be eligible to port to a different area if you would like. And this is that document that you would use. What you should know about EIV. This next one here, this is a HUD system to verify certain pieces of information about you once that you are on the program. So this kind of just goes through and explains all of that. Debts owed to public housing agencies and terminations. This informs you that you can't owe money to a housing authority or landlord while on the program. Otherwise, you can't have a voucher. Next one is the interim recertification request. This is how you report a change in your household. So all changes must be reported within 10 days. And you need to turn in this form along with all the other documentation of the change. So once you have all the necessary documentation, we can then look at your file. If you don't have all the documents, then the change is not processed. And again, if you have any questions, just give us a call and we can help you out. This form is also on the website if you need it. Owner responsibilities. This just goes through the Section 8 voucher program, the owner responsibilities. The next one is your Notice of Rights, which is the Violence Against Women Act. This kind of just goes through all of that, and also just so you know, this act is for anyone. It doesn't have to just be women. It's just kind of how it started out. And again, This is about the Violence Against Women Act. If you're eligible to claim VAWA, this is the form that you use. So make sure that you attach all supporting documents and return them to us within the time frame listed. The next document in your packet is information on informal hearings. The top section applies to applicants, and then the rest of the document applies to participants. Okay. This next brochure here talks about fraud and just some helpful information there. The next one is a book that discusses room requirements, pardon me. It's called A Good Place to Live. I want to take a look at that. That is pretty helpful as well. All right, the next document. This is just a brochure that talks about the HCV program in general. This is also a brochure for the home ownership program. If you have any questions with that, you can also contact Carrie. Her information is right here. Well, one of us can help you, but Carrie is the go-to gal here. And the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, also called the FSS program. This document here just kind of talks about that and what it is. Again, Carrie is your contact if you have additional questions. So this next document is the housing allowance for tenant, paid utilities and appliances. This helps you calculate if the unit works with your income. So once your income is calculated, you'll get a range that you can look in. HUD always makes you pay 30% of your gross adjusted income toward gross rent plus utility costs, but they'll allow you to go as high as 40%. HUD doesn't allow you to go over 40% at move-in. All right, this next one is, your voucher actually. Your voucher is good for 60 days, and you can ask for 2 30-day extensions, one extension at a time. You must request the extension before your voucher expires. This is your voucher extension form. This is what you would use to request the extension. Once approved, staff will give you an expiration date. The next one is providing rental information to managers and owners. Mandatory there. And then the next form is your request for tenancy approval. This is the form that you give to the landlord. You're going to fill out your name and address on the second page, and then the landlord completes the first page and the remainder of the second page. So once you have this form, along with the lead addendum, which is I'll show you next, we can check to see if that works with your income, and then we can set up your inspection. So also, just so you know, this request for tenancy approval, this form is due by the 20th of the month. It's to have assistance by the following month. So if we get the form after the 20th, there's no guarantee we can provide assistance. You will be responsible to pay the rent on your own. So here's that lead disclosure of information on lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards. This form is completed by the landlord, but you sign an initial where highlighted. This comes back to us with the request for tenancy approval form that we just talked about. So when you've found a rental unit, this is the document you want to take a look at. It kind of goes over what to do once you found that. All right, moving on. The authorization for release of information. Make sure you read through this. We're going to need signatures from all of you. The next one is your tenancy addendum. This becomes part of your lease. The landlord, you, and your agency will agree to the terms spelled out in this document. The next one is fair housing. It's your right. Make sure you look through that. We want to avoid any discrimination, and we want everything to be fair. So just make sure you are familiar with your rights. And then this next document talks about, are you a victim of housing discrimination? Again, it kind of discusses all of that. So just make sure you are familiar with that. Of information, and it's probably overload for you, but it is all really good information, which is why we provide it to you. So just make sure you've taken a look at it all. All right, so you've now completed your online briefing. Your next step is the application packet itself. So if you haven't already done so, make sure to download the application packet and complete that. It looks like this. This is the beginning of it here. The packet also includes at the end an entire checklist of the documents that you will need. So you might want to take a look at that because that's helpful. So congratulations on completing your briefing completion. Your online briefing is now complete. And what you'll do next is just contact our office to schedule a time to get your voucher. Also, if you had written any questions down, throughout this presentation, you can get the answers to that and just chat with either Tanya or Ryan here, and they'll be able to help you out. So again, Tanya is our rental assistance manager. You can contact her via email at Tanya, Tania, at brainerdhra.org, or via direct phone number is 218-824-3433. Ryan, again, rental assistance specialist. His is Ryan, Ryan, at brainerdhra.org, and his direct line is 218-824-3426.